Hi, I'm Yelena.
And I'm David.
And in this tutorial, we're going to look at what to do to protect your knees when practicing.
Knee safety is a big issue in our tradition of Ashtanga yoga because there's so much half lotus happening and even just general knee flexion and hip rotation. So we need to be very specific, very intentional about how we're positioning our shins and our thighs together when we're folding the leg to protect the knee over the years and years of our practice, right? We want to have healthier knees after 10 or 15 or 20 years of practice. You don't want to, mess them up.
And we have a lot of students that are coming with some kind of background, so either running or gymnastics, skiing, where they are showing up with some kind of issues in their knees already. So in this tutorial, we'll also talk about how do you modify and make the practice accessible to someone that is dealing with something that perhaps is permanent.
Right. And I don't know, neither of us have knee issues, so maybe that means we know what we're talking about, but I don't know. You should tell us, so make sure to comment. And if there's something else that you want us to talk about, please let us know. We'll make a tutorial about it. Okay? And also subscribe to us because we are going to keep posting every week all the sorts of different information. Okay, so let's dive in. Let's talk first about the anatomy of the knee, very generally. So the only thing we really have to say about the knee is that it's a hinge joint. It opens and it closes, and it extends to 180 degrees, and then it folds like that.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky. That's about all it does. Or that's all it should do. You don't want your knee to do anything that isn't hinge-like because it puts torque pressure on the knee, and that's where you start to get irritation in the ligaments or, little meniscus tears, things like that. So we have to basically honor the hinge all the time in our practice. And that means if we can do something like Half Lotus, that we always want to be quite specific about positioning the shin and the thigh together so that if you can imagine the front of the shin and the front of the thigh, they basically stack in a line. When we're drawing our foot up into lotus, we never want to lift the shin higher than the thigh because you can imagine the shin bone lifting this way while the thigh stays down here. It starts to torque the knee, right?
And this is something that a lot of us who perhaps come to practice with this mobility already, in our body, we do this because we start to move not so mindfully, and we start to speed up. And so as we stop paying attention, we start to do these funny things with our joint, with our knee joint, and the knee will take it for a little while. It'll be fine. And then it's going to start to give you a little signals. The other reason why some of us do that is we try to move the calf out of the way because we think we're going to fold and close better. But as we do that, we don't honor that relationship that David was just mentioning. And again, we start lifting our shin bone much higher than it needs to go.
Yeah, you can even start to get some rotation there when you're catching the calf. It's almost like you're rotating the shin off of the thigh. Mm-hmm. So let's go through the steps that we would take just to go into Half Lotus, assuming that that's safe for us. So the first thing we're going to do is close the knee, and you have two options for that. You could rotate the leg out and bring the heel up towards the thigh. So you've got your knee closed like a Janu Shirshasana position, or you could fold your leg, bring the heel towards the bum, more like a Marichasana position in Ashtanga. Both of those are going to effectively close the shin to the thigh together. If you can't do that, don't worry, we're going to get to that. But first, assuming that this is okay, this is step one, you've closed the leg. Now at some point, if you did the Marichasana, you're still going to have to come into the external rotation and bring the leg out to the side. Most of us don't have an issue with this at first, right? This is all pretty easy. This is where the problem comes now. We need to get the foot up onto the top of the thigh to come into Half Lotus. But if we just pull, like Yelena was saying, if we just pull the shin up, look what happens with the shin bone relative to the thigh bone. The thigh bone stays down here, but the shin bone is lifting higher. And that's going to create torque pressure. It shows up over time. We want instead to use the strength of the arms to hold the shin against the thigh so that we're maintaining pressure in the correct direction, closing the hinge. And then we're going to use the muscles in the hip to externally rotate and lift the whole thigh and leg off the floor. Okay? Just rolling it back and out lifts the shin high enough that it's going to be able to clear the thigh. So first, we're closing the knee. Second, we're rolling back on the hip, externally rotating the thigh and the shin as one piece to lift up. And then third, we're going to adduct. We're going to swing the leg in just enough so that the top of the thigh, or the top of the ankle, comes over the top of the thigh. Okay, any of these movements, could be more tricky according to what's going on in your hip. But ideally, these are the three actions that'll take place to get you into a safe half lotus. And if you were doing full lotus, you would do the same on the other side. The only issue with the other side is that now you have to monitor this foot and this leg. You have to keep it in, so you can keep adducting, squeezing it in towards the center as you bring the other leg back. And you won't have as much play with the thigh because of this foot trapping the leg. So again, Yellen is using this hand to close the knee joint. She's pulling the heel in, not up. And then she's going to use the muscle in her hip to roll it out as she brings the leg into position. So I remember when I started for the first few years, that was really hard to do. The first couple of times I got into full lotus, I felt like I was going to explode out of it in any second. There was a ton of tension in the hips.
For me, half lotus and full lotus were always accessible, but what started to show up after 2 years of practice is knee in the pain, because I was kind of mindlessly closing it and doing a lot of this. And so the knees gave a warning. If that's where you are, don't worry. All it means is that for like a week or 2 or 3, you just need to back off. We'll show you how to back off. Then everything will calm down in the knee and you go back to doing your full half lotus or lotus.
With extra attention.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I should mention there's another rule. Anywhere else in the body, if you say you feel discomfort, we'll ask you, well, describe the discomfort. But in the knee, any sensation, you have to get out. We don't put up with anything there. So if you're feeling something, just get out and see if you can trace the steps again with a little bit more attention and focus.
Yeah, knee pain will just get worse.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens if you just can't get there? Maybe you can't close the knee joint, just this step 1. Or when you try to, even with the knee joint closed, lift the foot, you can't get it high enough to come onto the top of the thigh. First, don't worry, you can still keep practicing yoga. It's very common. This is where most of us start out. Very, very common. So what we're going to do as a modification is flamingo pose. And flamingo requires you to just close your knee halfway. Don't go any deeper than halfway. And then you're going to lift the whole leg and put the ankle just above the opposite knee. So the ankle is just above and just to the outside. The foot is slightly flexed, so the toes are going to point forward towards the front of the mat. And the knee will be in the air, totally normal. You're just going to let it sit there. So if we were doing something like Ardha Baddha Padma Paschimottanasana, half-bound lotus forward bend, then we would get into this position. We could bring the right arm behind, same as if we were binding in half lotus, but we won't bind. We'll keep the hand there. And the other arm comes forward, and then this is your posture. And as you roll forward on the sits bones, especially the right sit bone, you're going to feel a nice, deep opening, stretch in the right hip that's going to bring you closer to being able to realize the full version of the pose, right? Half lotus. Also, if you were doing the standing version, it would be the same thing, right? Ardha Baddha Padmottanasana, same position again.
Mm-hmm. You really want to make sure that if this is where you are, each day you can try to do the full version of half lotus and close. And if you see that it's not going there, then you have to come back here. We don't want to do these incremental sort of steps towards the hip, because here we're starting to compromise the knee joint. When the foot is just above the knee, this is considered safe for your knee and it's an open joint. Here, as we think about deepening it, what we're actually starting to do is close the knee joint, and we're misaligning the shin bones in relation to our thigh bones. So we're starting to get a little bit of that movement that we want to avoid at all costs. So you can try it. It's not going there. Go back to this position. And what's great about this position is that both David and I, who now can do like behind head, no problem, find it such a good and juicy stretch after all of this time. So stick with it.
Yeah, it's still creating a lot of change in your body. And then finally, if you're doing something like Marachasana, B or D, two other postures in the Ashtanga system that require half lotus, then you could also do flamingo again. For Marachasana B, we'd recommend then from here, you would just pull the foot back like you would in the full version. Bring the heel, back towards your hip so that eventually the heel is under the knee, but do what you can. And then you could keep your arms behind you for support and press your chest towards your leg, very deep stretch in the hip. Or when you're ready to go deeper, you can lift the hand of the standing leg, put it onto the shin to help pull you forward. And you can see Yelena's hip starts to lift off the floor, mimicking the full version of the posture. So she's not trying to do the arm bind here. She's just working on the hip. Because usually the thing that's limiting us in Marachasana B isn't the bind, right? It's the hip. And then for Marachasana D, you could do the same thing. So you'd do the flamingo, and this time bring the twist in, either just grabbing the foot with the hand and looking over the shoulder. So you're bringing a twist into the posture. Or if you want to go deeper, you could bring the tricep onto the foot and get the shoulder as close as possible here. That's very deep. Yelena makes that look easy, but it's an option, right? If your knee is bothering you. And then you could even try to bind in this one, but that gets a little bit crazy. But you could try too. If it's only the knee and everything else is wide open in your body, you've been practicing a while, but you just need something to fill in for half lotus, that's a great posture too.
Mm-hmm. And it's also totally normal if one side you can do a full expression of a posture, so you can do half lotus, and then on the other side you have to modify. We would say just do whatever it is on either side. Don't try to scale back on the better side so that it matches the other side, because either way both sides are getting the stretch that they need. All right, so if you like this tutorial, remember there's many others. Subscribe to our channel. Let us know what you'd want to see, and we see you soon.
See you soon.